and welcome to another episode of Schiffbauer Over Rocks. Today I got another marketing guy, ladies and gentlemen, also a friend and colleague and a mentor of sorts. We'll get into that background with each other. Jim Rafferty, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
So I think it's a fun story. How do we know each other?
We know each other through the greater insight community and, leadership groups, a monthly sort of roundtable meetings where we all sit and try to solve each other's problems. And then the Insight Connects, the sort of big brother of that with the larger networking events in Baltimore. So, it's been several years now, right?
Yeah, it's going on 5.
Yeah. So you were like 14 when we met or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I tell folks, because people ask me you run a group, I run a group up here from the leadership groups now with Mike Tisch. Shout out Mike Tisch.
Yeah, Mike.
But it's funny, like when I describe it, they're like, how do you get like involved with that? I tell them a funny story where it was a random symposium that Mike spoke at.
Right.
It's the first time I ever saw him or heard his name even. Just because I'm from New York, down in Baltimore County. I was getting out of my neck of the woods, if you believe it or not. And I remember he was on a panel and he's like, business is personal. And me, I'm going into like my second full year, like running my consultancy. I'm like, business is not personal. Like, what the hell does he mean by that?
Yeah.
And then they were just like rattling off different things where like Mike did like a 6-month free membership to like Insight leadership groups. And I remember Grant Walsh called me up because he helped organize that symposium. He's like, hey man, this woman won this like free 6-month thing, but like she lives in like Southern Virginia, so she can't do it. So I told Mike Tisch to get in touch with you. So just by chance, it's really weird, Jim, how like just the degrees of separation, how things kind of pan out over time.
It is. Yeah. And that's true. And that really proves that business is personal, because I look back over 12 and a half years as a self-employed marketer, and the places where business has come from are just really random sometimes, and things like that, where, not only did you randomly meet in the event, but the person who won the prize couldn't use the prize. And
this guy was looking out for me
lap.
Based on our relationship that we had.
Yeah, and I talk about those groups with people a lot. I mean, they've been hugely helpful to me to this day, but especially in the first couple of years of starting a business, to sit there and get some advice from people who are not competing with you, who have more experience than you do or have a different perspective than you do, which everybody does by definition, right? The power of the group is really an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's just the perspective piece alone. It's just like certain things, it's like you learn about people or they share. It's like you would never think like face value, like, whoa, that's coming from this guy running this like granite business.
Yep. And they get very deeply personal in a good way too. I mean, we really get to know each other and sort of what makes each other tick, and our family lives and all that are all, because you can't separate the two. Like we talked about, business is personal, and what's going on at home affects what you do as a business person, and vice versa. There's no separating those. So.
And just kind of tie that in like a little segue with business and like your personal life being interconnected. I'm sure you can relate to this when you're in client service, like we both are. It's just really fascinating when sometimes, like when you hear something from a client where it might seem like a curveball, like out of left field, like why is he responding like that? And you got to sit back and just like think and listen. One thing I've really learned over time is just having patience and understanding why someone might be coming from where they are. It might not even necessarily be your professional engagement or relationship. It could be something you don't even know about.
Yeah, one of the hardest things for me is not immediately firing off a response to an email for the very same reason. What are they thinking, right? And sometimes you step away and let it brew a little bit and think on it, then it becomes more clear and they get a more reasoned response than they would have otherwise. And, to try not to do that knee-jerk reaction thing.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It's better to wait. Sometimes it's, depending on what the issue is, to address the bull in the room. But 9 times out of 10, it's just process what's being said and then going from there.
Yeah.
Diving deeper with client service, how do you get into marketing?
Yeah, man, boy, by accident for me, really. If we look at the whole arc of my careers, plural. I mean, I started as a radio announcer, and then I was a program director. That's what brought me to Baltimore a long, long time ago.
You do have like an old school radio voice.
Thank you. I still do some voiceover work, and that's fun. When your radio career comes to an end, you look at your resume and you realize like none of that is really meaningful to anybody in the the quote unquote real world. But one of the things you learn in radio is how to not only speak conversationally, but to write conversationally. And that's huge in marketing. And it's never been more important than in the internet era, because we do most of our communicating with our eyeballs, right? Or reading websites or email blasts or individual emails or whatever. And I think that's something that's really helped, is that ability as I transitioned. And it was a long road from radio to marketing. I mean, I did blue collar stuff in between and all that. But yeah, that's how I think that was sort of the basic skill set that got me started into marketing. And then, as you know, the marketing part is fun because it's both sides of your brain. It's, it's the creative stuff, but then also the analytics and the digital stuff and figuring out how to make something work online and all that. It's a tremendous amount of fun.
That's what I typically describe to folks, like marketing in a nutshell. It's like half, like you said, like that creative psychology aspect, and then the other half just the math.
Yeah.
If you're doing marketing right in terms of making informed decisions for folks.
Yep.
I really liked how you touched upon your experience with radio in conversations, because I think it's becoming even more, or rephrase that, it's going to become even more predominantly as like a need moving forward with AI. With folks where they think they just can shoot something out. It's the ease of use, but it's like, are you really standing out amongst your competitors in your copy and what you're saying in your messaging?
Yeah, AI, there's still some work to be done there. And we don't know how it's going to turn out in terms of the new jobs it will create versus the jobs it replaces. I don't know if you saw this week the news that Sam's Club is rolling out a replacement of basically the people at the door who check your receipt. They're going to start doing that with AI scanners.
Really?
When you shop with their app, right? You ring it up in the app and you go out the door and it scans your cart. And, so there's some jobs that people will have to be doing other things. So, but the AI writing, like, when I use ChatGPT, I'll use it for bullet points for something I have to write. It's great for reeling in some other ideas that maybe I didn't think of. It's great for generating list of keywords for a Google Ads campaign or that kind of thing. The writing to me, for the most part, looks like a 7th grade term paper, kind of like it's not quite ready for professional.
The big time.
Yeah.
And I would say too, it's just like using tools like that. It's, you got to like learn how to like prompt it best, or like ask the right questions. Yeah. But even still, it's just like, hey, write me some sample Facebook ads for a local construction company.
Sure.
And it's going to have like the general high quality craftsmanship. I tell folks, and I'm sure you can relate to this, it's just when I sit down with a new client, I'm like, what makes you unique in terms of like what you do? And I beat them up a little bit. They're like, oh, high quality craftsmanship, customer service. I'm like, no.
Family business. Yeah.
Well, what are you doing that your competitors don't do? One. And then two, even if you do the same thing, are your competitors not messaging a certain item that you can like capitalize on?
Yeah.
In terms of making you unique, in terms of how you communicate to the folks you're after in your community.
Yep. And a lot of people don't ask those questions. One of my favorite things about what I do is that first client discovery meeting, when you get to learn a little bit about their business and what makes it tick. And, say, well, I need a website. And a lot of people don't bother to stop to ask, like, why do you need a website? And what do you want that website to do? What's your business model? Where does your business come from? Is your website ever going to convert a customer, or does all your business come from boots on the ground salespeople seeing customers who are then going to go to your website and you need a nice brochure, right? It's two different, nothing wrong with that, but it's two very different models. So, and I think there are still some people out there who don't ask those questions. Or
I think most people in our line of work, 90% of them don't. It's like they just give a prescription rather than actually diagnose what's really wrong in their business or why they're seeking out something that's a solution.
Yeah, and that's what sets us apart, I think, when we come in and ask those questions and make them think about some things. I mean, I've more than once sat there with a client or a prospect, I guess, at that point, and they'll say, well, the three most important things about our business are X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, okay, well, none of that's on your website, or it is, but I had to go 3 menu levels deep to find it. So why don't let's address that, that kind of thing.
this is fun for me because we get to nerd out a little bit about marketing.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's touching on the messaging part. It's like also the consistency of it. If you're running paid ads, is that messaging in the advertisement? Is it on the Facebook page in terms of the organic content? Is it on the first key page of the website or first key pages?
Yeah.
And then if someone's contacting you, is that like sales rep or administrator reinforcing those points?
Right.
Where like it all makes sense at that point, where someone clearly knows what you're doing at that point.
Yep. 100%. This is very nice, by the way.
Oh, the Balvenie? It is delicious, folks. I would love to have a liquor sponsor at some point. And we've got cigars, though. They're pretty damn good.
That's pretty nice.
But yeah, the Double Wood 12 year. It's like smoky, almost.
Yeah, just a little, though. It's not like it's not the real peaty kind, which are also okay, but this is nice in between.
And now, in terms of like your career outside professionally, you mentioned earlier you wore all these hats, like with the resume.
Yeah.
What has been really, you feel like, some of the most impactful, like personal moments in your life that have kind of shaped who you are as a professional?
Certainly being a husband and a father, I think, more than anything else. Our kids are now, this month, they'll be 29 and 26. So, they're both out of the house and off doing their own thing, which is great. But that shapes you because, it just sort of changes your whole worldview in terms of priorities and all of that. So I'd say, that certainly is first. And I think the thing in my personality that I think translates really to my work, like I've almost never had a job where I only did one thing, where it was just this is your job and you do this one thing. When I was in the remodeling business, I was the marketing guy and also the sales manager, but then also sort of the de facto IT guy in-house because, like the one-eyed man in the land of the blind, I used to say, because people in the office weren't very good about computers, but, I was good enough to solve 90% of what came up. Right?
And I love the construction home service guys, but like,
right.
I love when they tell me, it's like, Paul, I'm clueless.
It's not their wheelhouse. And
I'm
that's
like,
okay. There's art in what they do, and they have other skills. But, and that's, as I've moved into the marketing consulting thing over the last, 12 and a half years now that I've done this, that's really what I love about, like, for one client, I might just be doing a voiceover. For another, maybe it's an email newsletter, and that's all. For others, it's I'm sort of an embedded consultant. One now where the CEO is of a certain age and wants to phase out of daily operations, and so my role grows, and that's great. I love that every client is different, every day is different. You feel like you're using all your muscles when you do what we do, I think.
Which is good. I know for me, we're becoming more proceduralized in what we do, but it's kind of holistic in the sense where we got to think about this.
Yeah.
In terms of like, even if this is like a process or a program now, what's this variable? Or we got to come over here and do this at this point in terms of like an ad strategy.
Yeah, and that's really that's the difference between our two models, even though we do some of the same things, is that you do have to proceduralize because you have employees and you want to grow, right? And in order to do that, you have to have those processes and procedures in place. I'm essentially a one-man shop who works with a couple of vendor partners, web developers and graphic designers and that kind of thing. But I don't have anybody depending on me to feed their family, which is good. I'm happy with that.
It's a nice lifestyle business for you where
it is.
You flex your muscles and help people out. Speaking of which, I want to touch into just mentioning about impactful life events. Yeah. So let's talk about your book a little bit.
Yeah, that was actually a couple of impactful life events there. So Leader by Accident came about because
Mark's getting the close up.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, available on Amazon, audiobook read by the author, et cetera, et cetera. Leader by Accident came about because I very suddenly became scoutmaster of my son's scout troop some time ago, 2008, when the existing scoutmaster and his wife and two sons were all murdered by their oldest son, which is still hard to talk about, believe it or not, 16 years later. But I stepped into the scoutmaster role, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but I was not I had been a Boy Scout for all of about 2 weeks. I was not any kind of outdoors person. I had none of the skills you would want in a Scoutmaster. And it's an organization at that point where the future was somewhat in doubt because
The turmoil.
right, sure, we didn't know if the other parents would want their kids to still be around after what had happened. So that, as it happened, it turned out great. A lot of people stepped up and helped. It didn't turn out great because of me, but because a lot of people stepped up. But it was a lesson in leadership and a lesson in personal growth that I'm so glad I did, because part two, sort of Leader by Accident, is, a few years later, I very suddenly lost the job that I'd had for a little over 2 decades at that remodeling company, and started to look for other work because that was all I knew how to do, and never had crossed my mind to have my own company. But I wound up hanging out my own shingle, and that is by far the best thing that's ever happened to me professionally. So it's about that. The book itself is set up. There's a thing in scouting called the Scoutmaster Minute, which is essentially a little homily at the end of each meeting, sort of send the boys out the door with a positive or a motivational thought. And I worked hard on those, because even if I didn't know anything about camping, I figured that I could do, right? And so I kept an archive of those. So I use those throughout the book to sort of tee up the next chapter and take whatever it was I was trying to share with the Scouts and then turn that into something that I hope is meaningful for you and me and people trying to get through our business lives and our personal lives. There's a lot of personal stuff in there too. So that's been a really fun adventure to create the book, to have it published, to do the speaking engagements around it, and sort of, it's a couple of years old now, and it's been great. It's I still have people randomly come up to me and say that a certain part of it really meant something special to them, and it's different parts, which is also really cool.
Which in terms of what resonates with people,
right?
I was just about to ask you. It was on the tip of my tongue. It's any interesting interactions you've had, people reaching out.
Yeah, and like I said, the fun part is it's something different for everybody else. More than one person has said, "Oh, yeah, I had the boss like that," that kind of thing. Others have said, "Man, what you said about gratitude in there is so important." And something I hear a lot from people was, "I really needed to hear that right now."
It's funny sometimes when things come at you when you need it almost.
Yeah, they do, and we've all been told to be grateful for things, and we've all been taught, there's more than enough leadership literature on the face of the earth, right? But, somebody asked Zig Ziglar, the old sales trainer, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody said to him, the trouble with, your sales training is it doesn't last. And Zig said, well, neither does showering. That's why we recommend doing it daily.
I love that. Right? I actually never heard that one from him.
And that's how I look at this. It's like, maybe it is what you need to hear right now, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you've heard it before in a different form, but that's the feedback that I've had, is that, man, this is what's going on in my life right now, and this part really spoke to that. So that's been great.
What does gratitude mean to you personally?
I think gratitude just puts me in a better place to live my life and to face my days and the challenges that come with them. I think if we start from a place of gratitude, everything else comes a little easier. And it's not always easy. We know that. But I think it has to be a habit, though. And I know some people do journaling. I think that's great. My thing I still do is, last thing before I close my eyes at night, I come up with 3 things that happened that day that I am grateful for. And some days it's a struggle to come up with 3. And some days it's a struggle to decide which 3. And that's also a really useful exercise in what's important to us. But there's so much negative. I mean, gosh, we're in election year now, so there's really a lot of negative. But
you got to drown it out.
All this was before, right? All this was before the social media has become this maelstrom of just negativity and shouting and half-baked truths and all that stuff. And point being, I think we have to work harder to cultivate that sense of gratitude, and I think it's probably more important than ever that we do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I was reflecting that I don't have a nightly ritual like that. I really like you sharing that for your own personal experience of what you do, because there's so much, even at the bullshit we experience. It's a blessing to have certain challenges, because people, it's what you might be complaining about a client. This is I have a client.
Yeah. Right. I have a client. They pay me money to do what I do, right?
I'm able to work for myself. This is a good problem.
It is.
I just remember a couple weeks ago, it's just like I thought about it, like, you know what? All the challenges, the bullshit I put myself through or went through, it's just like I'm thankful for it. You know, it makes you, who I am today. Good, bad, or ugly.
It is. The challenges change us. And I mean, that's certainly true of the book. The being tossed into the Scoutmaster role with no notice, the being tossed into entrepreneurship, with really no experience. And that ties back to the beginning of our discussion and Insight leadership groups and how big a help that was at that moment. Not just in terms of me getting my business off the ground, but in terms of sitting around that table and realizing that when I talked and offered advice, people listened. And that was a huge confidence builder in the early days of doing this. So, those challenges are what shape us, and it would be great if we just, all every day was sunny and we ate ice cream all day and, nothing bad ever happened. But that's not it. We're going to have our challenges. We have to learn from them and figure out what they mean for us and how to grow.
Mm-hmm. Tying it back to Insight and just entrepreneurship in general, one of my favorite things that you and Mike have really coined, it's like, doesn't have to be lonely at the top.
Right.
I've told folks that one of my biggest pet peeves, and this is me just being a little cynical, is so every once in a while, have you seen like those like that thread Facebook post, like a business owner will share it where like, you don't know, like it's like from the point of view where like, you don't know how the long hours, the struggle it is being a business owner, almost like a woe is me post.
Yeah.
I've seen like small business owners sharing it.
Yep.
To me, that's like the biggest piece of bullshit that they sell themselves in a way. It's just like they got to realize there's people just like them out there, even if the challenges are different, Jim.
I think a lot of people don't understand that because a lot of people will never have the whatever you want to call it. They're not wired to do that, to go launch the business and to suffer like that and put in the long hours.
Well, I think it's touching on it's just like they don't seek out the help.
Right.
They're an owner.
100%. Yeah.
Or to me, it's just they thinking like they're isolated. They're not.
Yeah, it should not be lonely at the top. And the thing I always say about Insight groups is if you are the president of a 200-person company, right, an Insight group will give you some unvarnished feedback that maybe you need that you're not going to get in the office. If you are that solo entrepreneur and you're working the 14-hour days and all that, it's part of that's just the empathy of that there are other people going through what I am going through. But not only that you don't have to reinvent the wheel with every challenge that comes up. Somebody else has lived through that, and chances are they're at this table.
Yeah, or in parallel where there's residents.
Right.
And I tell folks too, and like I've missed some groups here and there over the years, but it's this, we're not, especially when up in New York, when I tell people about this outlet where I feel like it could be, let's check it out, it could be a good fit for them. Oh, I don't have the time. I say, hey, it's 3 hours once a month. You need to find the time for yourself just to think outside of your normal day-to-day a little bit.
Yeah, it does, because it's something that widens your perspective. And business owners always say, but don't necessarily do. That they should be working on the business and not in the business. And some of them have a very hard time getting out of the weeds enough to take those even 3 hours and look at the bigger perspective of what's going on. And it's really helpful to do that. But they're not for everybody, but they're for a lot of people.
There's so many personalities, Jim, that I've encountered in groups.
Yeah.
It's super fascinating.
Yeah, and I am 100% sincere when I say, I've done a lot of business with the people I've met in Insight groups, and that probably is not the greatest of the benefits of being in those groups.
It's a side effect.
The business is right. It is a side effect.
That's why I tell folks. So I've had people ask me, just like, well, dude, like, is it like a networking group? I'm like, no, not necessarily at all.
Is it BNI? That's what I get.
It is a peer group. It is worth checking out. This as a guess. And I think the biggest thing, Jim, the groups have done for me, and this is a realization I've had only just recently, we're all living life for the first time.
Yep.
You see, and we interact with some quirky people, or all across the spectrum in terms of personalities and experience in these groups. Just in general, when you're out and about, it's just take a moment to understand where someone's coming from.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. And, you will find as you get older too that we look back and we would have done things different ways if we'd known. Like we turn into different people, hopefully in a good way as we age. But the groups can help sort of I don't want to say short circuit, but maybe shrink that process a little bit by drawing on the experience that other people have had.
Oh, I know for a fact, me being a young guy in my mid-20s when I first joined a group,
Yep.
I'm like, I am literally paying almost an education in part in these groups, just learning from people like what not to do.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about coming up in terms of just projects or life events?
Well, let's see. Life events in about a week from today, actually, I should be in Grand Teton National Park. And then from there, we're going to Yellowstone. So that's about a week, 8-9 days, I guess, total. So hopefully it won't snow because that's an iffy thing out there in May. But excited about that in the short term. Our son gets married in Nashville, which is where he lives, a year from last week. So that's coming up. So that's fun. So the life stuff is good. Work stuff is good. It's, shaping up to be a decent year again. And, every year that I get to do this is a blessing. I love to do my work. I love being a part of the Insight things and facilitating the group and being part of Insight Connects and all of that, because just that whole greater community of business people. Again, I'm the ultimate solo entrepreneur, and I am so much better at that and at just being a human being because I associate with this greater group of networking. And I would say to anybody, you didn't ask my one regret, but I will tell you what it is, because it's on that note. All those years when I had a job and I got a paycheck and I was in an office, I should have been building a network, and I wasn't. Right. And things would have gone even better if I had put in that time then. So, I would say to anybody, no matter what you do, whether you're chained to a desk or all day, get out to some business happy hours, give some stuff, meet some people, because it just makes you better. I mean, it makes you a better person. It makes you a better business person. And, God forbid, next week you don't have that job anymore. You've got to start. You've got some people you can sit down and have a coffee with and say, hey, what do you think I should do next?
People who are going to look after you one way or another.
People are incredibly generous.
More than we
think. Yes. When I first hung out my shingle or was thinking of it, I had coffee with everybody I knew, which wasn't a very long list. And one guy and another, quote, another guy in our space shared his client agreement, said, here, change the name, use my paperwork, and some other documents. It was just incredibly generous acts that people did.
That's why I love.
People will help.
It's funny when you're like in certain industries, that you got people who, it's in every industry too. It's either abundance mentality or scarcity mentality.
Yes.
It's just, there's enough to go around in marketing. There's enough to go around in roofing.
There's plenty.
Some people are just different though. But to me, it's those scarcity-minded people. Don't necessarily want those people in my network necessarily.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and we've talked about that in groups as well. But and the other side of that, I met maybe a month ago at a networking thing. I met another marketer. She does very similar stuff to what I do. And we had a nice conversation, and we agreed to sit down and have a coffee, and we learned a couple of things from each other. And you know what? I do stuff that she doesn't do, and she does stuff that I don't do, and there's an opportunity to refer business. And like you said, there's enough there for everybody. There's no reason to go, oh, that's a competitor, I don't want to talk to them.
Yeah.
I don't, life's too short.
It really is. And it's funny too. It's just like, even if like you and the one woman you mentioned, even if it was like exactly the same.
Yeah.
Would say you both put a proposal, same price for a particular prospect. At that end of the day, it's just like, do I like Jim more and his dad jokes he posts on Facebook? Or do I like Jade? I'm just throwing a name out there in her like presentation on how like she presented herself.
Right.
Where it becomes that, it's a personal aspect too.
It is. There's all kinds of elements to that client fit, right? It's not, if it's about price, you're doing it wrong, I think.
I think in any industry at the end of the day.
But it is. It's that relationship. I have an out-of-town client in, and I've known them forever, in fairness, but they're in Erie, PA, and that was ground zero for the eclipse last month. That was one of the towns where it was, totality.
It's where you look at it, folks. You will have glaucoma or something of that nature.
Yeah, I see. Why do my eyes hurt? Was the top Google search the next day. Yeah,
it's so funny.
But anyway, the client, hotels, of course, have been sold out for a year at stupid prices. And I had to go up and see them. I was due for a visit around then anyway. And they were like, come stay with us at our house. And I thought, this is a client, this is a business relationship. But that's just the kind of, when I talk about client fit, and, you've got to mesh personality-wise, I think, with someone to really do your best and to do the best for them.
And I think it's very flattering Jim, when you get a proposition like that? Not even you didn't take it or don't even have to take it when something like that
we couldn't.
occurs.
As it happened, the dates didn't work. My wife couldn't get off, and whatever. But,
Business is personal. Of course, there's still professional lines to serve retrospects, but I think it's very flattering when someone else has that much trust in you.
Yes.
Where
it
I've heard
absolutely is.
stuff like about marriages and personal business from clients.
Yeah.
Over time,
Yeah,
I'm just
sometimes.
like, whoa. Like, I'll listen to you.
I'll listen. Yep. It's, I'm not qualified to help, but I'll listen.
I'm not a psychologist, but we
maybe
kind of are, though.
Maybe I kind of am. I'll be, I've been married. It'll be 35 years in the fall, so maybe I'm qualified to or something. I don't know.
Dr. Melfi and the Sopranos.
Yeah.
Sit across.
Yeah.
Where do you see marketing going moving forward? With you've been around marketing now in your own practice for a number of years. Been around it in previous careers.
Yeah.
What's next, do you feel like?
Well, we touched on AI. I mean, that's certainly going to play a role in multiple ways, and already is. For me, I don't know. I'm of a certain age, and I'm old school. And you and I have had the conversation separately about our feelings of, for many businesses, like unpaid social media is not really a productive use of your time and resources, I think. But,
No, absolutely not.
That kind of thing. But I hope the messaging still matters, and I hope, I still really try to think about actual human beings and how they're going to consume a certain message and what's going to get their attention, and not just the numbers and the click-through rates and stuff like that. And I hope we don't completely lose that human touch. I think we're in danger of that. I think that the digital stuff has gotten so pointy-headed that we're in danger of leaving common sense behind.
You raise a great point, Jim, and just kind of tying it back, at least from my lens. Mm-hmm. It's just I have folks come in, do my best to frame it the way that we do. It's just they're hung up on certain variables, like you said, or what's this cost? What's that cost? I think something that has always been around with marketing and advertising, going back to the golden era in the 60s, it's what's your story?
Yeah.
What is your brand or business's story?
Yep. And what's in it for me as the consumer? Right.
And I think that's never going to go out of style, regardless of what tools come up over time.
Yes. And you will have, I have had certain clients oh, well, shouldn't we A/B test the subject lines in this email? I'm like, you have 350 subscribers, so no, we shouldn't, because that's not going to be statistically significant.
But we're worried about this aspect of the UX design of the site. I'm like, let's get traffic to the website.
Yeah, let's start with that,
and we'll and get you some leads, and then we'll talk about some of these more secondary items which do have relevance.
Yeah,
but let's not get too hung up on something like that micro.
Yeah, and that's an important thing, I think, in what we do, is helping a client understand the journey, in that we're not going to flip a switch and tomorrow everything's going to happen. If the website, the website is still generally the hub of what's going on with your business. So if we're going to do multiple things, we're going to start there. We're going to get that right and telling the story that you need to tell, as you say, right? And then work from there with the other stuff. Because if we do the other stuff before the website's right, then you're wasting your time and money, that kind of thing. So there is, for a lot of clients, it's sort of an iterative process that goes along from point A to point B. And I think explaining that to them and how it should work and how it should unfold is important in what we do.
Well, Jim, I know Marty's signaling for last call over there. It's been a pleasure having you on the day. I want to say, though, any final thoughts? Anything you just want to put out there?
This is so much fun. When you write a book, you get asked to be on podcasts, and I've done a bunch, and it's great, but not with people who directly do what I do. And obviously you and I know each other, so that makes it more fun. This is the first one with Scotch and cigars, so that's better.
There it is.
But although we did talk about bourbon on one of them, a couple of guys down south somewhere. But yeah, I love the conversation. I love that it wasn't all about the book or all about marketing or all the, I feel like we covered a lot of stuff. So.
And just to be honest, Jim, and for folks out there, I love getting a guest on where we talk about who they are, what they do, and there may be some key things going on that they want to highlight. But I think it's also, too, is just showing you as a person.
Yeah.
Because it's just because this podcast to me is essentially we're at the bar right now. I'm meeting you at a networking event for the first time.
Yeah, it should be.
And let's say we hit it off, have a great conversation.
Yeah.
It's been folks we have rapport. So it's why we kept clicking. But there's been folks I've had on that I've never met in person until they sat in this chair right there.
Yeah.
You're sitting in.
A little harder from your end, but yep.
A lot of times it's a little harder.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, though, it just clicks.
Yeah. Right.
Which is great. As if, you're out and about.
And again, we circle back to the beginning. It's about being conversational. I mean, that's where it happens when you can draw it out. And a lot of marketing is sort of a one-way conversation. But, to the degree that we can make that happen in what we do as marketers, it's going to help our clients.
Yeah, make it two-way.
Right.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Jim Rafferty, leader by accident, principal consultant in his own right.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thanks.